Steve. Actually, I'm going to put my own little timer here because I have a selection that may or may not go over, and I'll cut it if necessary. I just wanted to say first, this is a welcome and significant occurrence for me, and that may be in part because the poems in this book are drawn from a good decade of work, and thus they contain all the network of memory, experience, opinion and reflection that one's writing necessarily represents. The earliest were probably written in some form or another 11 or 12 years ago. Others finished not long before I submitted the manuscript to the Friendly Street competition, and I enjoyed being able to weave such temporally disparate poems into something like a meaningful, if loose, poetic narrative, and it feels good to have that decade so elegantly summarised with a first collection published at the end of 2019. And it's also significant, of course, because while poetry and art more broadly may not always attract the kind of financial rewards that are the dominant currency of our day, art's value lies, of course, as value does and should, in the ideas, emotions, stories and communities that circle around it. And so to be part of those communities and recognised by them is an affirming and privileged position to occupy. So as it happened, I was going to start off with a poem that is I think the earliest previously published poem from this book. It also happens to be a name drop poem. It's called The Truest Thing, and it is about Ernest Hemingway. Okay. One way to imagine it is that Hemingway, at the end, looked back not with despair or regret, but only with the knowledge, real and heavy and beautiful in its way, that those few short Paris years had been the truest thing he would ever know, had given him the truest things he would ever write. One way to imagine it is that Hemingway, at the end, was sitting once more on the Boulevard Saint-Michel, a young man with longish hair, sipping hot coffee because it was morning, and carefully finishing one more story. That was not the truest thing he would ever write, but would have to do. The final page, an echoing blast, and then blackness, an after image of remembering.